Hey folks, Fernando doing another video for the Survivalist, and in this case I want to do a video talking about the different types of prepper, the different approach that you have to preparedness and survival, and which one seems to be, at least in my opinion, the one that's most efficient. Of course, yeah, spoiler, it's going to be the one I have, the one I've been doing for quite some time, and I mean, this is nothing against anyone else that does anything different. Of course, people have different opinions of things. This is of course mine, and the one I feel is the best and the one that's most efficient and the one that I try to promote in the channel. By the way, we are closer to 71,000 subscribers. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do so. I'm close to hitting 200,000 subscribers in my Spanish channel. I'd like to see my English channel grow a bit more as well. That would be awesome. So if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so and sharing videos that you feel are useful and other people could benefit from. You know, the YouTube algorithm is not, these companies are not exactly much of a fan of the kind of mindset that we try to promote in channels like these, but the algorithm, though, if it sees lots of subscribers, lots of people sharing the content, commenting, thumbs up, that sort of thing, the algorithm does catch up with that and starts promoting it more. And of course, I feel that the more people are better prepared, the better it is individually for each one, but also in a more generalized manner, the more people around me that are better prepared and more in tune and aware of what's going on, I think that benefits me as well. So yeah, but that's basically the philosophy here. So what are the different type of preppers or survivalists, and which is the one that I feel is a more efficient or realistic one, I guess? There's different types, and I've talked about this some in my books as well. You have different approaches, and it's gonna be also a matter of personal taste in many cases. You have your bushcrafter type of survivalist that's gonna be focusing on mostly on nature, improvising things with natural materials, trying to minimize the amount of industrialized, modern day era stuff that they bring into the equation. You're going to be seeing lots of little knives like these, usually avoiding colors like these. They want to go with more of the bushcrafty type of green, browns and such. Also wearing and using clothes in those colors as well, which is kind of counterintuitive in many ways, because this would be the color that's more visible in case you lose something. You're gonna be seeing lots of little knives like this, very much fans of the Puko shorter knives, and they feel that anything bigger than that is just a big old waste of time and metal. They want to be usually they're gonna be avoiding the more tactical looking blades. And well, there's a lot of merits, lots of the bushcraft type survival, back to the ancient skills, or Native Americans, or native of whatever part of the world you can think of, some of those primitive skills in making cordage and starting fires without using any kind of modern. I think that's all very valuable, very useful, natural herbs, trapping, and all that sort of thing. I think it gets to a point where it's kind of counterintuitive as well, in terms of, if I have something that simplifies things, why would I go for something that is older text simply because of a matter of aesthetics or even a matter of general philosophy? You will see, I see that it gets a lot to that point of, yeah, I'm going to be going with something more old schoolish. I'm going to be more of a frontiersman, almost like reenactors of what a frontiersman back in the day would have had with him. Rather than, dude, you have access to things that are better. Why on earth? I mean, I get it that you have the ability to make stuff. I get it that if you want to learn how to, carve with your knives, and yes, this would be the nicer knife for carving things, that the Scandi type of blade is going to be working well for that. But why would I remove this, more rugged, resistant hilt, a handle, and use just wooden one or bone simply because it looks more old schoolish type of thing? Why would I have a kit with less useful stuff simply because it takes you back to a certain era? If you're gonna be having a little tin with a fire starter kit, maybe get the most efficient things for starting fires. At least that's my take on it. I completely understand why someone simply does what he feels is he just wants to do something and he enjoys something done differently more, I absolutely get it. My idea of a fire kit is gonna be a lighter, a fire steel, and a few matches. That's the more efficient way of starting fire with the most proven and reliable tools for that job, right? Someone else will have like a little tin with charcoal cloth and a little flint and steel, and I kind of not see the point of all that, but I get it why others do. Then you have the more classic wilderness survival school of survival, which is survival in different environments, surviving in the forest, in the mountains, jungle, desert survival, coast, sea. When you're floating in a raft, how is it you're going to be surviving that? So you have all these different environments, and how would you be surviving in those if you all of a sudden find yourself lost in that place? This is like the more classic approach to survival, the more classic school of survival, and it has a close link to what is going to be like military training, especially for escape and evasion, especially for downed pilots, that sort of thing. How is it that you're going to be surviving in these different type of environments? And the premise here is, well, all of a sudden you find yourself here and survive with whatever it is that you have at hand. That is also fantastic. I love the idea. I think there's lots of things to learn from that. I've read more books than I could possibly remember about that sort of thing. And yes, it's about improvising. It's about using whatever it is that you have. That's fantastic. That is definitely skills that you want to develop. My only take with that, though, is how likely is it that I'm going to be finding myself lost in the middle of the Amazon jungle? And I've lived in South America most of my life, so I kind of get it that, yeah, sure, if a plane falls or you find yourself going through there for whatever reason and you're just lost, I mean, yeah, it's could it happen? Sure. I mean, I've told the story before about taking a vehicle to a construction site in the Andes, like between Argentina and Chile, between the two countries, up in the mountains, very high, and we got stranded there for a night. And I don't know, that is a very specific scenario, which I don't know that a lot of people find themselves all that often in that sort of thing. And the main problem with that was that there was no road yet, because this construction site was building the road. We were taking a Hilux 4x4 truck, so it's all the road that's only cut through the mountain, and the road is what was actually being made in that site. And at the end of the day, the only valuable thing that came to mind, and I guess that it did save the day for that specific case, was I was there with my friend. My friend, as soon as we had this accident, he thought, hey, we're going to be walking back to town. And I told him, no, you're going to be staying here, and in the morning we'll figure things out. And that's exactly what we did. We solved the problem and got out of there. But his idea was, I'm going to be getting out and walking and getting back to town. And I did a very quick mental calculation. I don't think I had written already my first book, but I was very much into survival and preparedness by that time. And I told him, if you go out of this car right now and you start walking in the middle of the damn Andes where we are, you're going to be dying. There was actually a little stone, like a stone shelter made in the mountain with a skeleton inside that no one had bothered to remove, and the skeleton was still there. It was like the skeleton's cave. And he told him, if you get out of the car and start walking right now, you're going to be yet another skeleton in this damn place, because given the distance that you would have to walk, given how cold it is right now outside, you're not going to be making it. You're going to be dying right here in this place. And he looked at me, okay. I'll just go take a pee outside. I told him, you know what, peanut bottle. Do you have a bottle here? No, he was a bit self-conscious about that. He went outside, and when he came back, he told me, I almost got my dick frozen because of how cold it is out here. So all of these little things, yes, they can be useful and handy. And this is the kind of thing that the more you learn, the more you will assimilate all these things, and they can be life-saving in a situation like this. If we had both gotten out of the car and started walking, I mean, I'm pretty much guaranteeing we would both be dead if we had done something that, stupid is not the word. It's not the word. I knew it was stupid to do that based on the knowledge I had already acquired. So I knew we couldn't possibly walk that amount of kilometers in that environment, and make it out alive. So someone that doesn't know that, he may end up trying to do that. And in fact, it was kind of recently that a few people, I think it was like 3 people in a car in Patagonia. They got out of the car, started walking in the middle of the snow, and they made it like 3 kilometers before both of them froze to death. And the woman that stayed in the vehicle was later found and rescued, and she made it. The other 2 guys died. But that's the kind of thing that, yes, this kind of survival definitely helps you out in these situations. Now, having said that, how often is it that people find themselves stranded in the middle of the Andes or in a snowstorm? That is a lot more likely, sure, especially depending on where you live, right? So having an idea of your own capabilities, the kind of clothes you should be wearing, how far you can actually walk when there's snow this high or no snow at all, but a different type of terrains. Yes, very useful, very important. But I often feel that it's not the full picture of what I consider to be a more realistic, practical survival and preparedness, because it's kind of limiting to very exceptional situations, which often make it to the news. If both of us had died that day, we probably would have been like a footnote in a paper the following day, and but you would have at least made it to the paper. Yet thousands of people die in a number of other more ordinary things or events or tragedies, and no one even takes note of that. So I feel that that's more of the realistic approach. But nothing wrong with neither bushcrafting nor wilderness survival. This is all fantastic. Then you have what I called back in the day when I published my first book, this one right here, which I'm trying to make the Spanish version of, in Modern Survival Manual, the little house in the prayer syndrome. This idea that you're going to be building a homestead, a farm, and maybe getting a few people there, or even a couple of families living together or whatnot. But basically, you're going to be self-sufficient. You're going to be having your own power, your own food, and you're going to be having your well, and that is all fantastic. Nothing wrong with that. That's awesome. But that you're going to be surviving whatever happens, whatever end of the world event takes place, you're going to be surviving it because you are self-sufficient and you are living in your little house of the prayer version of, your own version of that. This just does not work that way. I mean, I've been doing this for quite a long time already. It's been almost, 2 decades of being a professional survival and preparedness writer, consultant, and a bunch of other things related to this. This is indeed my profession. Like the movie 300 where Leonidas asks, what is your profession? Well, this is my profession. For a lot of people, it is simply not. It's more of a hobby or something that you enjoy doing. In 20 years later and three somewhat successful, actually very successful books later, I've acquired a bit of experience regarding all of this and knowledge. A lot of this is just researching stuff that has happened and learning from different events. It's not just, you cannot just focus on just one. Of course, you cannot focus on one experience, your own experience, and leave it at that. I mean, I wrote my first book mostly based on my own experience in the Argentine economic crisis in 2001. But from that point on, you keep on learning from other people, other events, other moments in history and different parts of the world, and how things ended up working out for them. That's where you get more of a clear picture. And if you have a good thought process and analyze all of this information properly, you come to certain conclusions that, yeah, man, this is useful stuff. This is basically how it ends up being. This is exactly what ends up happening in this specific event, or this is what happened in this specific event, and it happened the same thing over here and here and here. Okay, I kind of get an idea of the picture, and once you process all that, you come to certain conclusions. One of the more basic conclusions is that no, you're not gonna be the little house in the prayer dude while the end of the world, while the rest of the world collapses around you. El Alamo, as we all know, ended in a specific way. way, which was not particularly good for the defenders, the same thing will happen time and time and time and again, right? And if you look at, for example, South Africa, which I often bring up, same thing with the white farmers over there, slaughtered, butchered, tortured, raped, killed by the thousands, in spite of being very well armed. No matter how many guns you have, when you are in a hostile environment, in a hostile country or a hostile region, your chances of survival eventually end up being zero. Sooner or later, they're going to be getting you. No matter how many battles you win, you're going to be losing the war eventually when you are the homestead or the little group of people in a place that is just coming after you. The same thing, talking with Daniel from Bushcraft in Latin America, his YouTube channel, Guy in Venezuela. We actually had a great interview the other day, a great chat, how people, he knew at least 5 different people that had like homesteads and farms and try to make it there, growing their own food and, living there while the rest of the country goes the way we all know. But eventually they come across problems. There's not enough fuel for tractors. There's not enough spare parts. There's not enough fertilizer. It's all super expensive. Whatever tools need to be replaced, there's nothing else to go along with that. You have corruption. You have the government coming after anything you've actually managed to produce. And if it's not the government, it's the hungry people all around you that are constantly looking to steal whatever it is that they can. And no matter how many times you defend yourself, and actually if you defend yourself successfully, you're going to be finding you're using one of those successfully against these people, there's a good chance that the government, the local politicians, the police will come after you for doing what you thought you had the right to do, which you probably should have had. But in this political environment, you no longer do. And you can look at this time and again. It doesn't matter if you're in Yemen when it's being bombed, or in Syria, or if you're in eastern Ukraine when Russians roll in and take over that territory. If you are surrounded by enemies, you are kind of in a position where you have to reevaluate. Maybe you have to relocate to somewhere where life is more viable, right? The kind of thing, yes, that I covered in this book right here. Yes, I know I'm bringing out like the ads of my own books, but this is the kind of thing that I've been doing. I mean, this is what I do. As I said, this is my profession. This is what I do, and it's directly related to all of these topics. So what's the way? I mean, and I don't want to make this video too long. You have, of course, the missile crisis in US, survivalist, doomsday, nuclear apocalypse type of survival. The idea was building a bunker and waiting it out for 2 weeks until radiation levels went down, and then you had the gear. You went out and you fought whatever invading force was there. You have a cultural idea of what survival is, like in places like Switzerland, where they plan on having shelters so as to defend themselves as an entire nation against a foreign invader, and how they're going to be fighting that, how they're going to be organizing. They have like little combat positions across the entire country, and they have 3,000 bridges ready to be blown up so as to stop the advances of enemy forces, and they have gravity-fed sources of waters in most towns. I mean, they have an entire culture, and it's part of their identity is being basically survivalist against a very specific type of event, which is being invaded by foreign forces. So you have all of these. Then you have, unfortunately, this is the one that it's the most useless of them all, which is the fantasy prepper, the reality TV prepper, which is, it is complete bullshit. I mean, that's all there is to it, and it's just focusing your survival and preps and your preparedness plans on something that is either unrealistic, or completely unrealistic, or so far-fetched and so unlikely that it ends up being counterproductive, and it's worse than having a completely different life and not even thinking about it. This is something I came across very early on when this was actually, I think it was the first run of Doomsday Preppers. I got a producer of Doomsday Preppers contacted me, and we had the interview thing, and eventually I don't remember what was it. It was I've talked with some people from different TV things, and they all want you to there's different things. usually they're not paying much at all, or they pay very little, which is something that eventually when you are doing this professionally, and you value your time, and your time has a given price. When you're doing consulting, when you're helping out either companies or people with some of their concerns regarding all of this, your time has a certain value. The more knowledge and expertise you have, the more that it's worth. And many of these companies, they usually go for the desire of 5 minutes of fame or 15 minutes of fame that a lot of people have. And sure, maybe that's a way of catapulting yourself and being recognized and such. But when that's no longer the case for you, it's usually not very, unless you have your own TV show where you're really making a lot of money, which is fantastic if you get to that point. But just showing up in Doomsday Prepper, not as glorious as it would seem. But talking with one of these ladies, she told me, well, so what are you preparing for? And I explained her, I think I had already published my first book, or anyway, I explained to her, look, I'm actually, this is my reality, and she said, like, so you're preparing for an economic collapse? That's what you're preparing for? Because she was used to talking with people that were preparing for a solar flare, peak oil. So she wanted like a nice little box to tick as of, you're preparing for this. Something that hasn't actually happened, but you're preparing for this sort of funny thing that's going to be making good reality TV. And I told her, no, you don't get it. The economy already collapsed here. We are already surviving an economic collapse. The country defaulted on its national debts, worst default in history ever. The president resigned, and we had 5 different presidents in a week. The local currency is at 1/3 or a fourth, a quarter of its original value, and it keeps on escalating, and it keeps getting worse. There's limits. I mean, you cannot access your money in your bank accounts anymore. They just froze your accounts, and people are just bartering in the streets and getting by whatever they can, while there's a lot of civil unrest on the streets, and stores are being looted daily, like people running with carts full of food. And she was like, oh, okay. So yeah, I guess that's the difference between, stuff that goes down for real and the fantasy that a lot of people have. But going back to the topic, if you're just focusing on and what I usually see is that people focus on a far-fetched scenario, but at the same time planning in a way that they are expecting this extremely unlikely and dramatic event to happen, but happening exactly in the way in which they want, which is convenient for them. And the first thing I explain to people who are planning this way is, you're just going wrong about all of this. First, this is highly unlikely to happen. Even if it does happen, it's not going to be in a manner that's convenient for you. This is like the Hollywood syndrome. You could call it like the I Am Legend syndrome. The idea, the Will Smith movie, great movie by the way, but the Will Smith movie, he's out there with his M4 carbine all tricked out, driving a Ferrari in the middle of an empty New York City. That is great. Yeah, sure, you have the zombies that only come out at night and all that bullshit, but imagine that same city full of people that are starving to death and killing one another over a bottle of water or a piece of food. Imagine how more terrible and frightening and unlikely to be surviving in that place, with everyone starving to death, and not everyone turn into a zombie, but actually a rational thinking, desperate human being that's going back to their primal instinct of staying alive by any means necessary. That is a lot more difficult to survive than doing it in the Will Smith I Am Legend version of the end of the world that is just convenient with everything for you just for taking. So you have all of these things, and some things complement one another. The bunker idea, depending on where you are and such, may make actually a lot of sense. I actually would love to have a bunker myself, having it all sorted out. That's something that would be nice to have eventually. Having some sort of self-reliance, generating some of your power, making some of your food, especially a well. These are all things that you definitely want to have. They're crucial. And even the wilderness survival stuff, these are lessons, especially when it applies to the military, escape and evasion. But especially for the military, it's also a matter of building up character and getting the people used to things that they've been never exposed to, like being cold, being wet, being uncomfortable, and still dealing with that and thinking with that and solving problem solving while uncomfortable, wet, and hungry, or burned because of the sun, and these positions in which people usually don't find themselves in. This just builds up character and gives you the mindset and the mental strength to overcome this sort of adversity, which makes a lot of sense for military as well. So learning from all of these little things, what it comes down to, at least for me, my approach is I try to be as hands-on, practical as possible. So my approach to survival and preparedness, the one I've been promoting in my channel, my books and such, is a pretty trying to be as objective as possible as what are the realistic threats that you have, and I break it down into 3 basic ones, which is the things that are unavoidable to happen eventually, pretty much to anyone. Every single person is going to be growing old, eventually going to be dying. So you prepare for all of these things as well. Surprising how many people don't prepare for dying. Having life insurance, so as to have your family taken care of in that case, in that eventuality. I actually got a very sad email once from someone that lost his wife when his daughter was just being born, and all of a sudden he finds himself without his a wife. He now has a baby, and they didn't have any life insurance, and he said, no, that would have been very useful, very helpful in these horrible times. At least that would have been at one least of concern. But all of a sudden he loses one of the incomes, he loses his wife, baby to deal with, not enough money to deal with all of that, and the grief. Sure, but people don't think about these things. You're going to be growing old, you're going to be getting sick eventually, basic stuff that happens to people, having family problems, having financial problems, the money aspect of preparedness, the financial aspect, all of these things I feel are, and why is it that people die? If you look at it, it's not zombies, it's not because you are eaten by cannibals in the middle of the Amazons, which kind of unlikely. It's not these things, or freezing to death in the middle of the Andes. It's mostly stuff like having a horrible diet and being just too damn overweight and sedentary lifestyle and working out more and eating healthier or eating actually less. These are the things that are going to be improving your survival chances, and not only that, but your quality of life greatly. Then I look at the things that are less likely, less likely to happen, but most people probably eventually it could happen. A house fire, car accidents, dealing with some natural emergencies or disasters, depending on where you live, and maybe more of a thing or not. Some people deal with storms, hurricanes, floods every season, and sure, it becomes like kind of unavoidable for them. So this goes from the likely to very likely or unavoidable kind of thing. But these accidents, or even being attacked, victim of a crime, this is going to be depending also on where you are. If you're from South America, most of the region is kind of like the kind of thing that is almost unavoidable, that you're going to be seeing that and having to deal with that. And then you have the more far-fetched, unlikely thing, but that would yet have more of a serious impact, like a global pandemic, or a huge financial collapse of all the markets and everything goes down, or internet going down. How is it you're going to be surviving without that? Even in a more large scale but still local event like a Fukushima, a tsunami, or a huge earthquake in your entire region changes your life completely. These are things that, again, this may be, depending on where you are, an earthquake may be just extremely likely or even unavoidable. For someone else, it simply will not happen unless they leave that region because you just don't have them where you are. So these are things that I look at: the unavoidable, the likely, and the less likely, and preparing accordingly, just using common sense for these. Folks, it's gonna be all for now. If you're interested in this sort of thing, you have my books there, you have the channel with lots of content. See you in the next video, guys. Have an awesome day. Take care.